I'm Mandy Yarkich from Creative Matters, and you're listening to Creative Matters on Air, where I have conversations with new and established artists from around New Zealand. I love to listen to artists' stories and learn about their creative process, and maybe you do too, which is why I've made this podcast, to inspire, inform and educate. I hope you can take away something positive and encouraging from each of these amazing stories to help you on your own creative journey. Hi, and welcome to Creative Matters. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm talking to Michelle Reid. Michelle is a painter living in Riverhead, Auckland. She graduated with a Bachelor of Textile Design from Massey University in 2001 and worked in the textile industry for 8 years in both New Zealand and London. In 2019, she gained a Postgraduate Diploma from Elam School of Fine Arts with distinction, at the same time as raising her 2 young children. An eclectic mix of written, visual and intuitive information inform her painting practice. Michelle is currently working with romantic art theories, ideas of regrowth in the post-human novel landscape, and reconnecting with pattern in painting. Michelle also draws much of her inspiration from American abstract expressionist painter Helen Frankenthaler. Michelle paints with oil on wood or reassembled canvas offcuts and watercolour on paper. You can see her beautiful work on our blog at creativematters.co.nz. Welcome to Creative Matters, Michelle.
Thank you, Mandy.
It's nice to have you here, and I haven't seen you for quite some time.
Yes, we've been going through this lockdown and it's been a long time since being anywhere.
I know, it's been a tricky time, hasn't it, for lots of Aucklanders in New Zealand?
Yeah.
So, Michelle, you and I know each other, we're friends, and also you work for me in Creative Matters as one of my educators.
Yes.
Which is awesome. So we met a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah, 2019, I think. Yeah.
So, you're an amazing educator and it's great to have you on the team.
Thank you.
And I'm really looking forward to hearing your story because I don't really know your background. So can you take us through right from the beginning where you were born and something about your childhood?
Sure. I was born in Auckland and quite soon, when I was quite small, about 18 months old, moved down to the Waikato and spent probably about the first 10 years of my life there on a farm, growing up on a farm there. And then sort of in my early teens, we shifted up to South Auckland and I went to high school and lived out my teen years there.
And whereabouts was that in South Auckland?
Papakura.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. Rosehill College was our sort of high school. Yeah.
Somebody else I interviewed recently lived out there, grew up there. It was Vanessa. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, she's a bit younger than you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so how did you go at high school with your, just actually going back to your childhood again. Were you a creative child?
I was a creative child. I probably have just a couple of very clear, vivid memories about creativity when I was sort of under 10, I suppose. And one of those would be painting with my auntie, who's probably been quite a large mentor in my life. And she had a beautiful studio in the north of New Zealand in Monganui, this gorgeous waterfront studio. I mean, I would just absolutely die to have a studio like she did. And we would sort of colour and draw and that sort of thing together. And so I have a very clear memory of drawing some underwater sea type things and felt pens and houses all stacked together sort of under my auntie's guidance. And that was the first moment that I thought, this is just great. I could just stay here all day. I didn't even notice it was sunny and I wanted to swim. I just sort of got lost in my own work. So that was probably my first, indication.
Was she an artist?
She is an artist, yes. Yeah, Glenys Summich is her name. And she lives in Australia now, but we keep in touch regularly. And
How lovely to have a mentor like that in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
how about your family? Your immediate family, were they creative?
Not in the ways of drawings and painting. But in other ways, yeah, my mum is a teacher, and my mum and dad separated, but my dad is a diamond setter, was a diamond setter. So yes, he is creative. And my stepfather, it was sort of farming and, yeah, sort of quite practical kind of person.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
My oldest immediate sister is a doctor, and she retrained quite late in life, but had always been working in the sort of science and medical kind of background. And I would say a lot of our interests actually are shared sometimes between a sort of a sciencey sort of interest and path. That was actually one subject I didn't take at school that I wished I had. Yeah, but I love having conversations with her. She's a great writer and just a very good thinker, and she's a very quick thinker, and so I have a really close relationship with her.
That's lovely. And maybe that sort of science bent that you have deep down is coming through in your art practice in some way.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sort of trying to find my feet a little bit with some of that content and information. Yeah.
So you obviously were kind of thinking pretty creatively. How did you go at high school with your art?
At high school, I took a lot of artistic subjects. I took painting and photography, and I had and art history. I had really wonderful teachers. Tessa Laird was one of my high school teachers, who went on to become, a wonderful artist and university professor. And I also had another lady, Mrs. Brown, and she was a brilliant art history teacher, and she brought so much enthusiasm to those classes that I was just hooked. I really, really enjoyed it. In fifth and sixth form, I really enjoyed the art classes, but when it came to seventh form, I didn't end up going through with seventh form painting. I felt quite sort of self-conscious at the time about my drawing abilities and my skills. But I had really loved doing things to do. I remember a project to do with Ralph Hortery, and I just really enjoyed that and sort of got some good marks back, So I wasn't too sure about how my artist voice was, going to be used, I suppose, in that age. But by not going to doing painting, it meant that I couldn't apply to art schools. And so I sort of found myself unable to apply for art schools, which was quite tricky.
And you actually wanted to? That was your plan?
Yeah, I was on the fence. I think around that time, though, I was also taking, I can't remember the name of the class, home economics type class, a sewing class with my best friend, Catherine Wilson, who's now a wonderful shoe designer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we were quite close, and we had lots of conversations about, what you're going to be when you grow up. And so the idea of sort of directing my artistic skills into something that could turn into some kind of product was quite appealing at the time. And so I was focusing more on the design route of things. So that led me into sort of the first steps of university and heading towards a design degree.
And did you go straight to uni from school?
Yeah, that's right. So I left Rosehill College and went straight to AUT, where I did a foundation in fashion design there. And I quite quickly realised that that degree in that sort of singular, only in fashion sort of major wouldn't be right for me. And I noticed that Wellington Polytech at the time was offering a degree that meant you could sort of work across different disciplines like industrial design and photography, and that was really appealing. So we both agreed at the time that would be a good idea. So Catherine and I sort of packed ourselves up and went down to Wellington to study there. So that was a really big deal and a really exciting time, and sort of the first flatting experience, all of that fun stuff.
All that good stuff.
Yeah.
Good student stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from the fashion design, what did you come to at the end of that first year? So you went into the other design with the other.
Yeah, that's right.
Different types of design.
Then, that's right. Then we started in Wellington with another foundation type paper that explored all of the different types of design practices there. And at that point, I realised I wasn't too sure, so I still took some papers like pattern making and ergonomics for fashion design. I took some of those things, but that's when I started to explore textile design, and eventually that became my major. Yeah. I about sort of 2 years into the degree, I was really enjoying it. And then towards the end, two things. I applied for a scholarship. Not a scholarship, an exchange program, which was in Scotland. And I went across to the Duncan of Jordanston Art College, which was a really exciting experience.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
and
it was amazing. In Scotland? It's in Dundee, which is around about an hour out of Edinburgh.
Right.
I think it's an hour north, close to the Firth of Tay, I think it is. Yeah, quite a backwater sort of town, but with a really reputable art and design college.
How amazing. What made you decide to do that?
There was an opportunity to do an exchange with 3 students coming to New Zealand and 3 to go to Scotland, so sort of a straight swap in a way. And 3 of us in the department got quite excited about it and applied for it to do it. And right at the last minute, the 3 girls in Scotland pulled out. But it was really set up between the universities. And actually, now that I think back, through Stella, one of the tutors, she was the Scottish tutor who I think sort of had a hand in the connection. Yeah.
So the 3 girls from Wellington still went over?
Yes, we did. We still went over and stayed in the sort of university accommodation and
amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing college, and that was my first sort of eye-opening experience to the differences between surface pattern and textile construction, and that sort of link across with arts. It was my first trip to Premier Vision in Paris, which was really exciting. We did this horrendous bus ride. I can't believe we went on a bus from Dundee all the way to Paris.
Oh my God.
It was awful.
Wow, that's a long way.
It was a long trip, yeah. But, an experience in itself. Yeah, it was great. But, coming back from that wonderful experience, I think I was just finding my feet in being overseas, and then had to come home 6 months later to finish my degree. And at that point, I was really sort of questioning, like, where is this going within New Zealand and the industry a bit more, and what are my skills all about? And I somehow sort of, I wasn't the happiest with my end of year hand in. And actually it's something that I'm sort of just readdressing now in my work, sort of starting to just pick up the bits and pieces on the why and where I left some of those questions, I suppose.
That's nice that you can come back to that.
Yeah.
And kind of resolve it in your own mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
In some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was it that you weren't happy with?
I sort of have come to the conclusion that I was dealing with ideas in a metaphorical way, and that wasn't really the intention with a design degree that needs a brief with a solution. It was more logical, to print a piece of fabric or to, set yourself a something to make with a finished result. And I started to approach that in a sort of a different way. The context was out of design, and I'm only really just figuring that out now.
And was that something that didn't really go down well with the lecturers?
Yeah, it was a bit hard getting it over the line, getting the essay handed in and the project work, and it was a bit of a tricky finish towards the end, but I got there, and that's good.
Yeah, that's good. After all that time.
Yeah.
And how did you actually, where were you thinking you were going to go after university, and how did that pan out?
I really wanted to find a way to be able to work towards making my own textile prints. That was some sort of burning ambition that was, deep down inside, that if you have a great textile print, it really shows identity within a fashion story or a fashion garment. So I was always in the camp of apparel fabrics, and I never had really explored the interior type fabrics, which was quite a division between sort of people who worked in textiles or work in textiles. So I knew that I was interested in the apparel textile market and was really hoping to find work in that zone. And then a few months after leaving school or uni, I was lucky enough to apply for and get a job with a wholesale company, which was called Global Textiles, based in Auckland. Yeah, so that was sort of my first real world job.
Wow, that's good. So you managed to find work, I guess, coming after, out of uni.
Yeah.
It can be hard. And what was your role within that?
I started there as a design assistant and eventually progressed to range coordinator. So that, I think I was there 5 years. And the role began helping the creative director with color stories and trend concepts, and thinking about the sort of all the fabrications that we were buying and what the end users were for, and figuring out the prices and the budgets and that sort of thing, to pull them together into collections of around about 150 fabrics per season that would then get sold on to the New Zealand designers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
It was a great role. Yeah. I mean, it was so great. And eventually the role progressed to include travel and sort of more design and buying responsibility, which was really exciting.
Buying fabrics from around the world?
Yes. Yeah. So we would have 3 or 4 trips a year to Asia, which included Taiwan, Korea, and China. And then of 2 of those trips, we would tack on an extra leg to London and Paris to see the textile exhibits like Premier Vision, and have a good look around the shops to see what's going on sort of fashion-wise in the other parts of the world.
That would be amazing.
It was really, it was a really exciting time.
That's a great job. And were you actually like drawing up designs very much?
No, we were buying in a lot of samples and working with the mills a lot with available prints that they had. And sometimes we would see something on a garment that looks really great, and then we'd sort of ask the mills if they could reinterpret that into a print. And at that stage, then we would adjust and tweak all the colours to sort of fit stories and pull things together to fit with the seasonal kind of fashion trends, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. So there was a lot of things that I would use in an artistic way, colour and fabrication and composition, exactly. Pattern,
yeah, shape, form, all those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So was that starting to inspire you as an artist to sort of start creating yourself on the side?
Yeah, I felt in myself that I was still attempting ways to draw, and I would have these failed attempts at home of coming up with pattern ideas that would be sort of fitting or going alongside these trends, but they never really made it out of my lounge. They just have stayed in a book, and I have a lot of sort of notebooks and workbooks of ripped, torn magazine pages with ideas that I'm like, oh, that would be a good one, and that would be a good one.
And why do you say they were failed attempts?
They would never really, one part was just not having probably enough confidence to show someone to say this is something, that could work. but also I would get halfway and, I would sort of trail off, or, maybe I might not fully complete that idea and I'd move on to something else. And the pathway to making these things seemed quite challenging for it to happen, because we were dealing a lot with offshore manufacturers. And even at that stage, which this would be kind of maybe 2005, 2008, at that stage, a lot of the textile industry was starting to close down. And it's really dwindled since then. But there was less availability to be able to print fabrics. And if you did, there's sort of large quantities attached to them. So the sort of importance of getting those things right was really, a really specific need and a really kind of high risk, I suppose, company-wise. Yeah. So I wasn't quite brave enough to ever get it going, I think. But I sort of kept it alive, I kept all the ideas alive.
And you were sort of playing at home a bit and experimenting and getting some ideas down at that point, but not necessarily for work. I mean, was it for work at that point, or were you just doing it because you liked to do it?
I was doing it because I liked to do it, just in my own time. And the other thing I did, thinking of that time, is I would go and stay with my auntie, who by then had shifted houses from this Monganui property to another gorgeous Monganui property with a studio looking over grapevines this time. And she was sort of teaching and guiding me a little bit with painting. And she's a painter who is really interested in portraiture as well as impressionism and expressionism, a little bit more so impressionism. And so we would set up still lifes like Matisse. That was one of her favourite painters, and we would paint these colourful Matisse type paintings, quite accurate kind of interpretations of them. So there was still this sort of playing somewhere with my creativity.
And were you starting to get a little bit more confident by this point, do you think, with your work, your own work?
Yeah, I was feeling probably quite creatively confused. I think I had a job that was on paper, looked and felt like it was a creative job, but my connection to my hands was missing. And, in the end, that's really what has drawn me back, is just not being directly related and connected to the work.
To the making.
Yeah. It was sort of this, all of the tools and the skills were there, but by sort of sending it all off to other people to do and make the things, it just was just not quite within my zone.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I guess there's people who like to use their brain creatively, like, people in advertising and I guess they still make things too, but it's the sort of conceptual stuff that some people think like that and others get ideas and then need to make.
Yes.
It's sort of different types of creatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, and it took me a long time to recognise that I was really discontented with that approach, Yeah, because, so following that job, I worked across in London for a couple of years in a slightly more technical role, which was very challenging, but really interesting. And, it was sort of after that.
Oh, there goes Massey. We'll just stop for a second. She's greeting somebody coming up the drive. Okay, sorry about that. Problem solved with the dog. What were you saying, Michelle, about London and the work that you're doing there?
So I was working in a fabric development role in London, and I worked in a company called Bowden mostly, and that was sort of a catalogue online type brand that had in-house, and still does, in-house print designers, which I was very admirable of. And I really had a great relationship with the lady Sue, who I worked with. Through that role, we would also do a lot of travelling, but most of the fabric selection was out of my hands. It was all to do with the designers choosing what they needed. So that was quite a performance-based role where I had to really learn all about fabric performance and waterproofing and sort of tear strength and some quite important properties of fabrics. And through the travel and discussions with the suppliers of those fabrics, it just really opened my eyes to the sort of the market of fashion in that global sense and what it was doing worldwide. And at one stage we had a key factory auditing trip planned around the south of China, and working with a much more senior colleague, I can remember going past a river that was turning red from dye that was being washed down in the water, and just feeling just so uncomfortable about that scenario, that it was, really uncared for, and that this is such an unseen kind of industry that happens behind the scenes. Most people just see it as a garment on a rack and don't know that stretch and reach that it has globally before it even gets to a product. And it just made me really uncomfortable. And around that time, I became pregnant and we moved back to New Zealand, but somehow that role really sowed the seeds for me with a massive sort of environmental concern and just the imbalance between what's happening with sort of consumption versus, environmental issues, which I sort of later started to try and tackle and approach, I suppose, in my art. Yeah.
And was that kind of putting you off, do you think, off the industry, or?
Absolutely.
And you felt like
it really changed my track.
Yeah.
I had been progressing in this industry and looking for some of these sort of sourcing and buying roles that seemed really glamorous when I was quite young. And just as I left, I was approached by Burberry to see if I would work with them as or come to interview as a textile buyer. And I remember thinking, I'm just about to leave, that's really, really tough. But at the same time, I was really sort of over the industry and I was over the style of work and I was really ready for the change. So I was really grateful to my children, actually, for bringing that about,
Yeah, that can be a good thing, can't it, sometimes?
Yeah.
Children is sort of a new period in your life, and that can open up, your mind to other possibilities.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a real line in the sand for me in the end. Yeah, but it worked. It's really worked well.
And you never went back?
Once we shifted home to Auckland, my husband and I tried our hand in a very small, sustainable accessories business where we were making alpaca and merino scarves and beanies. We just decided to start with one single product and see if we could get it all the way through the hoops from start to finish within New Zealand. And it was really challenging, and we had to let go of the fibre sourcing. We couldn't do that, but we could knit the product in New Zealand and make it here still. But in saying that sort of test drive of making a product really just sorted out quite quickly whether it was the right kind of business for us as a couple. And by then we had 2 little children, and we were working on it at nights, like after 9 o'clock, after he'd finished work and had dinner, and it was just too stressful. We found it too challenging. I would try and do things in the day, and then we'd try and have meetings at night, and it was too hard.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
We couldn't bear it in our relationship and family anymore, so we're like, this is not good.
Yeah.
Although we sort of romantically sometimes talk about, we might bring that back. But
those amazing scarves.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and they are gorgeous.
I bet. I
lovely
love
product.
alpaca
Yeah.
and possum. Yeah.
Lovely to wear.
Possum merino.
Merino and
Possum's
alpaca.
good too, though, isn't it? With alpaca.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So soft.
And I guess it would be frustrating for people trying to get that kind of business going with the, trying to make it affordable enough to keep it New Zealand based.
Yes.
Or keeping it sustainable can often be more expensive, and there's all those issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for New Zealand, we struggle with, our location is so isolated that we rely, around that time when I was, 2005, I can remember Designer Textiles just moved all their production. They were a really large merino making company, and they moved all of their production over to China because the machinery is just so much more advanced, and you can actually find fully sustainable factories that operate with solar power panels and, wonderful organic type inks. Some factories are really at the top of their game in this kind of field, but you have to really go and see, if you're looking for that, you have to really weed it out. Yeah, because there's a lot of people just expense. Trying to make a buck. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard when you're trying to fit that around your family as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So were you thinking then that, okay, this is my moment to blossom? And did you have thoughts at that time when you had your children and they were little that you were going to get back into your own art practice?
Yeah, I at some point, I don't know if it overlapped with when we were doing the accessories or if it was after, but I signed up to Matthew Brown's Brown School of Art to do a year-long course, and I knew that there was something creatively in me that I still wanted to explore, and I just thought, I'm going to try it out. It's 1 day a week. It's just going to be lovely, this really enjoyable day, which it just absolutely was. He's really created a brilliant community sort of artists and people who really, have a lovely working relationship there. And while I was there, I signed up for 2 years. The second year, I realised that my idea of becoming an artist later in life, potentially some sort of pipe dream of being retired and becoming an artist, was a long way off. And actually, I've got a lot of ideas that I'm processing, and it could be quite interesting to try and bring some of that into my actual making. And for some reason, that was just the first time that the light ever switched on, that this could work, maybe this is something.
Great. And what were you actually studying? I mean, what was the course that you were doing?
The course was the year-long art class. I can't remember. I think it's called year-long level 2 and 3 and 4, which is similar to a university stages of a bachelor, I suppose, but it's not assessed, although it's run in a really well-organised way that has different set of tasks, I suppose. What do you call them? Like, ideas for each year level. So in the level 2, it was quite well structured in that every 6 weeks or so, I think the topic would change, so that you had a chance to try sort of drawing or abstract making or still life, or we did a great collaborative kind of work all together, which was really fun.
Sounds amazing. It
was really cool.
Yeah.
And then in the third year, it was a little bit of that in the beginning, but towards the end, you take your own artwork into your own hands and, sort of explore with what you want. And that part for me, I sort of was taking that quite seriously. I was ready to sort of apply ideas to these things.
And do you think you sort of gained some confidence in your own abilities through that couple of years?
Yes, I knew quite quickly that this is what I wanted to do. And then I could suddenly see how many things related to it and how much I wanted to work through, which, for me, that sort of covered some ideas about the environmental issues that I could see with textiles and the sort of painting sort of history that I have with my auntie, that, I know these skills are here, I just don't really know how to use them. So, yeah, I could see them sort of suddenly starting to come together quite quickly.
How amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably about time. I'm sure your auntie was like, hallelujah, at last.
Probably.
Yeah, that's so good that you found that, and that's quite a change in direction in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I could really feel the decision making around that. What it means to commit and continue and sort of prioritize my arts above other things it's quite a decision, that definitely. You can go through to make it.
And then by then, were you starting to think of yourself as an artist?
That's a tricky question. By then, I was just wanting to find out more. I was so hungry for content and information to do with painting, and it was really refreshing to not be thinking about design for some reason. I just loved the open-endedness of arts, that it can be anything and it doesn't have to be a certain way, and
you're not working to a brief
exactly, and I love the materials, the sort of the paint and the sort of whole composition onto my surface.
And then after that time at the Brown School of Art, you at some point decided to go to Elam. How did that come about?
That sort of hunger for content and information and trying to sort out what these creative thoughts and feelings were just somehow instinctively made me want to go to a university to figure it out, I suppose. So I was so happy that, having been through Brown School of Art, I had a decent body of work that I could submit and see if I could get in. So I was really lucky to be accepted, and start my postgrad diploma there in fine arts.
Wow.
Yeah. So amazing. I signed up to that as a part-time class, which was brilliant because it just gave me a sense of, a bit of time, I suppose, to become familiar with the school and the lecturers, as well as just get a bit of a feel for my work, in that way. Yeah,
wow. And did you start, the work that you finally did in that last show, the atmospheric work?
Yes.
Was that something that you were kind of exploring all the way through? And in a second, actually, we'll get you to sort of describe the work that you make and the materials that you use. But were you kind of heading in that direction from the beginning of Elam? Or were you, because I presume you didn't do like a foundation year or anything like that, you were sort of straight in. So were you straight into your own work?
Yes, that's right. I think with that project in particular, I was really chasing a feeling. I was really something that had sort of buried itself somewhere back when I was sort of leaving England, and to do with the environment and my concern of the climate. It was some sort of uncomfortableness that I just needed to explore. And I really held on to that throughout the whole of that project. And then I was also already working in inks and working on timber, and I really liked the idea that they were sort of like drawing materials. And I love it when you come across great research, that sort of crosses paths with other ideas that you've already got. And I read a really beautiful book about Agnes Martin, and it was talking about her using sort of watercolours and inks and her drawing materials and these beautiful meditative spaces, and a lot of the writing in that book was just resonated with me. So I, rather than sort of re-exploring all my materiality, I just held on to the inks and worked with that for that project. I also really enjoyed tinting all my gessos, which is the underlayer in paintings. And I would use my gesso a lot like paint. So sometimes that would sort of come on top of the inks and then sometimes sort of, be buried underneath. But I would tint it so that as much as I could, just to try and sort of blend and smooth these sort of formless or cloud-like kind of atmospheres, I suppose. Yeah.
Beautiful. And they are really beautiful. And I can see that, that was 2019 that you finished Elam. It's only 2 years ago. And, your work still sort of feels like it sort of fits under that umbrella, I guess. So can you describe to our listeners, people who haven't seen your work, and you can see your work on your blog. So if people want to have a look, it's It's on your blog post, creativematters.co.nz. But can you describe what your work looks like and your practice?
Yes, my work is generally quite. I suppose I feel like I'm applying ideas of sort of watercolour and sort of quite watery wash type brush marks to surfaces, which would be either timber or, in more recent case, I'm using oil on canvas. But I think of them more as a kind of an idea of building, and I really think about building up the brush marks, and I think a lot in layers. So it's really enjoyable for me to use really thin and really light marks that eventually build into something, whether it's form or whether I play with sort of contrast and contradictions with some of those marks. But the works themselves are abstract style paintings, and I would say, I sort of say landscape, but they're not really, I suppose I'm always working somewhere in the landscape, but they're certainly not most obviously landscape style paintings. Yeah, they probably lean more into the abstract camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they definitely feel like you could put yourself in a place and you could step into them and you'd be somewhere almost.
Yes.
There's something about them that make you feel like it is representing a place in some form or a feeling of a place, or for me, that's from my point of view.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. But the theory that I was working with at Elam was atmospheric, atmosphere aesthetics. And that was centred around a book, an Italian writer called Tonino Graffiero, who is a professor in Italy. And he's written a very dense academic book that I had to read with a dictionary, but it was great. But atmosphere aesthetics and emotional spaces is exactly that sort of, that description, Mandy. And for me, that is a kind of it's a linchpin that somehow talks about the constructed atmospheres that we experience, whether it's the constructed sort of ideas of fashion and trends, or whether it's architecture, places that are made to feel a certain way that we inhabit and use, but that they sort of come alive, I suppose. There's those occasions where you just are having the best time and you're in a really beautiful position, and it's quite a spatial understanding, and you can't take it with you. It's always changing, and you go back to visit it and it might not be the same thing. So it's quite a sort of a sensorial and a temporal type concept, which I really loved, sort of getting to grips with a bit of understanding and a bit of context around that, and somehow that environmental connection, as well as that potentially sort of a playful way of constructing these atmospheres, has really resonated with me. And so it's something that sort of carried from my postgrad diploma into my new body of work.
Yeah, it has. That's really interesting. Wow. And you use lots of different materials, charcoal, ink, and obviously the gesso that you're talking about, and oils. And do you use acrylics ever?
I tried acrylics at the beginning, but they didn't really work for me. Yeah. I sort of got really into the inks and the fluidity of them. And I think it's that sort of fluid material that I seem to really like, because even with the oils, once I got them, I just love the colour that comes through with oils. And once I started working with them, I was still thinning them down. Like, I'm just pouring in the terps and pouring in the linseed oil to sort of get them thinner until I can sort of find a place where I'm happy just to sort of really gently start, and then I can build on it. Yeah, I'm not really one that, sort of goes out with a big loud brush stroke and, yeah. Although funnily enough, my really early works did exactly that, sort of big, bold, single sort of movements. Yeah.
Or maybe you
but
had to do
I've
that
sort of slowed it down
to make
a
you
bit.
realise that you needed to be calmer or slower or something.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how it evolves. And How do you actually go about, I mean, obviously, we'll talk about your other work that you've moved into from that, but still sort of thinking about that atmosphere work. You obviously have been doing quite a bit of research and that's informing what you're making. But is there something else that sort of inspires or influences what you actually end up creating?
Outside of atmosphere aesthetics type
outside
things?
of the research and the reading that you've been doing, is there something to do with why you're choosing the particular colours you're choosing, or
yes,
are there
absolutely.
other influences?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, specifically in the atmospheric disquiet one, I was really thinking a lot about cloudscapes and sort of environmental scenarios, which is and I got really interested in Turner and some of those romantic artists. But I absolutely look all around some of these subjects in all sorts of ways. I was also looking at another artist, Liu Fan, who makes some really beautiful drawings of ephemeral type things like wind, and he displaces sort of a space with a rock and, quite elemental type work. I think you say ukiyo-e, the Japanese type painting and prints, which have a really interesting way of expressing the landscape by, sort of layering imagery and sort of feeling it off the page. And a lot of these influences, those are a lot of artistic influences. And then more recently, I've started taking on board a bit more poetic type writing, sort of essay writing, as a way of, I think as a way of sort of playfully, but, trying to communicate, it helps me communicate the ideas that I'm thinking about. Yeah, the poetic side of things, I think. Yeah.
That's interesting. And do you think that's kind of having an effect on your work? Is your work changing as a result of that?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of writers more apparent in these works who I really enjoy reading. Bits of like Zadie Smith and another writer, Sabrina Oramark, who does some lovely and quite comical columns for the Paris Review, I think it is. And she has a great book of little short stories, which is sort of written like a fairy tale, almost a bit magic realism type stuff, which is quite cool. Yeah.
And is that actually inspiring, what you come up with?
Yes. Yeah. She wrote a really great piece about COVID, which I found just sort of brought laughter and like a change of my concept about what it is we're going through. Like that idea that when the lockdown happened, that she talked about how she doesn't have a machete to go out and cut the wheat to make the bread, and she can't make bread for her kids, and there's no flour at the supermarket, and what did I overlook in my life that I don't know how to do the basics? And something about those kind of ideas where she talks about the touchstone of normality changing colour. And, we all feel that at the moment. So many things are changing and we're sort of not quite sure where it's all going. And she had a lovely way of just sort of feeding in ideas of almost in a fairy tale way of things that feel real and things that are impossibly, unreal. Yeah.
And so what is your work doing that's reflecting those readings?
Oh, that's tricky. I sort of use them as a springboard, I suppose, when I'm thinking about the mood of the work and what it is I'm trying to express. So I have a few of those pieces of writing around, and in that one, she has also written a lovely line, which some of my drawings are named after, about patterns and cycles of things. And that was sort of the twig for me to start unpacking my own interest. What was it that I was so interested in textiles about, and where did I leave all of that, and how can I be an artist without readdressing some of those ideas in my own experience. So in some ways her writing just gave me a bit of courage to sort of open the box on some sort of buried
which is great, isn't it?
stuff.
And it's all kind of connected, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything that you've done. And it feels to me when I look at your more recent work that it has quite a sort of textile design feel about it, like some repeated patterns and repeated shapes, and really thinking about space and composition. So where's that going, do you think?
The more recent works are playing with pattern in a metaphorical sort of way, but in saying that, I've put myself through quite a literal translation in my sort of visual research, where I have been working on paper probably for about a year, coming up with different sort of drawings, and I just found myself really wanting to actually paint out a watercolour print or pattern, and I used Joseph Frank as a inspiration. I've been this next group of work, the Disobedient Patterns group of work, is a lot about growth and change and letting go, and some of these things that we're all sort of experiencing, I think. And I've been thinking a lot about sort of biodiversity and plant life and the pressures that are on that for us to live within our planetary boundaries. And so Joseph Frank's prints and patterns to me are just a brilliant, wildly organic kind of textile design patterns that, when you look at his full body of work, they go really global all around the world in terms of subject matter. So I have been most transfixed by this one, Hawaii, which is quite a large textile print. It's like 90 by 90 in 2 panels, and they alternate, which means you don't see the pattern repeats quite so obviously. And that's something that's really appealing to me and really quite hard to do. You most often will see, a spot or a stripe, or you can see the repeats quite easily. And I just love it when you can't find it. I love it when it's just looks like a big drawing and it's really hard to see where that repeat happens. I would always sort of fall down, I think, having to mathematically arrange some of these drawings and to turn it into a repeat. But seeing his work somehow took the borders off, that you can sort of see how it can be continuous, but you can still have enough space to fill a giant drawing within, a really large space, which I loved, yeah. So I reinterpreted his Hawaii design into New Zealand natives, which is a large mix of ferns and manuka and lacebark and lancewood and all sorts of plants, so that I could sort of see a New Zealand version of his Hawaii design. And that was a really enjoyable process. It was beautiful.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's so motivating, isn't it, when you have something that just sort of excites you and, makes you tingle all over with creativity. And you're ready to, to start
Absolutely.
creating and getting all these ideas. It's so amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, by that point it was sort of, I was just charging, that sort of obsession of you just like, oh, excuse me, I just need to get started and get going. Yeah, which is cool.
So where are you in that part of the process? Are you partway through, or?
Those ones I've finished as a double pattern, and I've just called them Aotearoa because that's their sort of, I've mixed a whole lot of plants in there. But I knew by sort of putting myself through that drawing process of figuring out those repeats that somehow that will feed into my painting practice, which it undoubtedly has. There's something about understanding the shapes and the use of space and that kind of filling of space and how Joseph Frank organised it that's been really helpful to see how the shapes kind of all float around each other and fill up, and the detail that he would go to with decorative kind of little dots and stripes and tiny little bits of information with colour.
I'll have to put a link to his work. Yeah, I'd like to have a look.
And in the end, actually, that print Hawaii has been my colour palette for this exhibition. So I decided just to stay with using these 7 colours that are the colour palette of his Hawaii design. So all of my paintings, although they sort of have different, different strengths of colour, they're actually only made out of those 7 colours. So I just have this kind of, these dye bath type kind of colours organised in the studio so that I can just use them in different layers. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then how do you add charcoal and ink? I mean, obviously you're using quite a lot of ink. I mean, do you actually mix the ink with the oils at all, or is that quite
actually
a separate thing?
No? Yeah, I have sort of tried to grow away a little. Actually, that's not completely true. I have tried to, because I'm dealing with pattern and because I'm sort of readdressing something to do with textiles. I knew that I needed to somehow move into canvas, and I really wanted to try sort of figure out my own sort of handling with that, but found the whole idea of going out to the shop to buy a canvas or to, I just found that really impossible to accept that, surely we can do this another way. I was thinking about the ideas of circular economies, how you can sort of take things from an end of life somewhere and reuse it somewhere else and hopefully sort of close a loop, I suppose. So I happened to be in Studio Art Supplies one day and saw their offcuts box and sort of grabbed a couple, genuinely just expecting to do some testers, and then thought, actually, maybe there's something in this. Once I'd sort of done a couple, I was like, I could start putting these pieces together and reassembling the pieces, I suppose. And that was just a really lovely moment because it feels really playful to sort of, to pull these bits and pieces together and sort of recompose, I suppose, out of these
and to be reusing
bits and pieces.
As well. And then so how do you actually attach them?
I was looking at tent repairs, which is a good YouTube clip for me, but just a really simple but really heavy duty glue I've used, and a really a good 24-hour solid press overnight so that they're really properly bonded. And then the pieces are actually quite strong together like that.
Beautiful. And do you see the edges? Are they rough edges?
Yeah, they're just really rough cut edges, that, which I quite like. Yeah. I sort of want that materiality to be sort of played into my paintings. I think, I feel really aware about what you can't see with fabrication and textile. So it's quite nice for me to see these sort of, and they also remind me of landscape kind of edges, pieces that are sort of interrupting and the disruptions and the changes between the pieces. So I really like.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I love the way it goes back to your textile background as well. Once again, a lot of it's sort of going back and just kind of tying everything together, isn't it really? And how do you actually put those onto a frame? Or do you have it just as a flat piece of canvas? I had them flat and I work on them individually flat. And then I started composing them together. And then I was thinking, these could be quite good if I worked back over top of them. So there's sort of this building process that's starting to happen. I noticed that some of them were, they actually looked really great, just sort of clipped up on the wall, unstretched. But some of them, because of the changes of the weights of the canvas, they would be a little bit buckling, sort of next to the join. So I've stretched them myself just onto stretcher frames just to try and keep them a bit more crisp, Nice.
And a bit smoother, which is much easier to paint on.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah.
So it's really nice, Michelle, to hear about your art practice and your amazing process. It's so interesting. And I'd love to know how you actually show your work and promote your work. So what sort of exhibitions have you been involved in?
I've got an exhibition coming up at Lake House in Takapuna, which unfortunately got delayed from COVID. So that's been shifted 2 or 3 times, but I'll be really looking forward to that one actually hanging in the space. But I really like thinking of my work in exhibition form because I really enjoy thinking about sort of the group of work or the body of work hanging all together and how they sort of link and relate to each other, sort of across the room and across space. And I often sort of try my best to check that in my studio. Sort of once I get one on the wall, and then there's something sort of to talk to and to sort of relate to. And I like being able to sort of play with those contradictions of colour, or, you know, whether they're sort of related through colour, or whether they're sort of in opposition or something. Yeah, so I find that that's sort of a really enjoyable part about exhibiting.
Yeah, and it becomes, you know, the body of work compared to one singular work is a different dynamic, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it also gives me a chance to sort of go down some of these rabbit holes with the research. I really love that part of being an artist and working in a way that I can layer some concepts together, and it gives me a chance to sort of look back and look forward at the same time. In this body of work, I've been looking at sort of romantic art theory and ideas of sort of this idea of novel landscape, what will happen to the landscape sort of after or in the future, you know, now that we sort of no longer have this pristine romantic landscape, and the idea of sort of rebuilding and growth and nature taking its course, you know. So it really gives me a chance to sort of really, you know, think through concepts and have a chance to apply them to a set of or a body of work, which I really like.
And the conversations between works.
Yeah, and a chance to move my work on, you know, a chance to sort of reflect and then push it forward in some way.
And how do you feel about getting your work out there?
I feel like I'm still a bit new and a bit awkward at that, which is probably just my nature. Yeah, I'm just, but I'm trying to be a bit better actually at that. I've become a member, I suppose, of the Toipoto mentoring program, and it's really great. It's a really interesting space just to hear from other artists. They share sort of interviews with working practicing artists and people who are running like Art Space Aotearoa. And that's really, really encouraging and sort of, you know, makes me think, well, you know, you just have to find your way with it and figure out what works for you. Yeah.
That sounds great. Toipoto.
That's right. Toipoto. Yeah, it's a Creative New Zealand mentoring program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
brilliant.
put a link to that as well on your blog.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I recommend it for people who might be a little bit, you know, unsure where they're at with their practice or need a bit of encouragement and help.
So it's you're brilliant. Being mentored by an artist for your practice? By
Dina Jesdick, who is a curator and writer, arts writer. And just really helpful hearing, you know, having a sounding board and having someone to sort of bounce ideas with is brilliant.
That's so good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some quite practical information. You know, it's not mentoring in a creative sense, it's actually mentoring in a professional sense, you know, things to think about how you promote yourself and how you sort of manage your budget and all that sort of thing. Some quite useful skills. Yeah,
that's a great thing to do now, isn't it? For your where you're up to, I guess, in your
absolutely
in your career, in your art career.
And of course, I have some sort of website work in progress, which might be a slow build, but you know, it's underway.
Happening.
It's happening,
which is good. That's a start. And you've got your Facebook and Instagram, which you obviously sort of post and tell stories on, which is nice.
Yes. Yeah, I enjoy using the stories the most actually, and I sort of feel like I only put a post on when it's a sort of something a bit more completed or something I really want to keep on the page. But yeah, the stories are quite a fun way to just stay, you know, a bit more involved daily or weekly or whatever.
It's a bit more informal, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I find one thing I find really hard with promoting work on those channels is that if you're not actually making and don't have any new work, sometimes it's hard to know what to put up, I find.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not making as much but you're still wanting to keep that momentum, you know, I guess showing your process is good. That's what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Videos of making, but I'm just not really into that. Yeah,
it's interesting. We had somebody presenter talk to us about sort of Instagram and the idea of how it works with, you know, sort of reels being the really popular thing to do, and I haven't really explored the idea of reels yet, maybe, but I can see how the momentum really builds with Instagram. I suppose as a person, I'm still not 100%, comfortable to really push that space out for myself, but I don't know if that would change. I think it's just to do with who I am. There's sort of only so many things I need to or want to share, unless it feels relevant.
Yeah.
But that might change. Maybe that's just getting a bit more confident with it. I'm not sure.
Have you ever actually put yourself out there as Michelle, the artist, or is it more about your work at the moment?
It's more about my work at the moment, yeah. And that definition of the artist is still something I'm trying on, or I don't know if it's a fully well-rounded description. But in saying that, I really love everything that comes with being an artist. I love that sort of flexibility of disciplines and the connections that it brings, and there's so many great things that come with it. It keeps me fully engaged in society and information, and and you meet so many wonderful people.
Just such a great community, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we are actually going to have to wrap it up, otherwise people are going to stop listening, just fall asleep. So I'd like to know, Michelle, just to finish off, what do you love most about what you're doing at the moment?
I think it's having the opportunity to really deep dive into sort of research and into a visual arts practice, and saving that space. Being able to do it. It's quite hard to make sure that you can still create and hold that space to do it. So I feel very lucky, and I really love doing that. I love being able to do it. And I really like to sort of find those overlaps of interests that start to have little light bulb moments, serendipitous kind of moments that you kind of go, oh, make something about those three bizarre things make sense. So I love that pulling together of ideas to sort of discover and explore some new territory, to me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you find most challenging?
Probably promoting myself and just sort of I think just being able to keep it all going, and I don't necessarily find that challenging because I do that for myself. I think it's hard to say because it's a bit of a double-edged thing where I want to see it grow, and just finding the right space for that to happen,
Yeah,
and how that happens, that will just take some time, I think. That will come.
Yeah, for sure. And you're a busy mum of 2 boys.
Yes.
How do you find the juggle with being a mum and a practicing artist?
It's busy, but as long as I'm well organised, it works fine. I mark out my studio days as a job, and I work in my garage, so I just sort of disappear out there for those days, and I try to be as sort of organised and disciplined about those days as possible, so that I don't sort of lose time, I suppose. I've always got something boiling, something on the pot, in the pot going.
Yeah.
So I like to get in there, and there's definitely time where I might not do anything, but usually something turns up, and I like all the in-between times, sort of preparing surfaces and working on drawings and sort of exploring ideas until the right questions start popping up, and then it's go.
And you're off.
Yeah.
And what do you think's in the future for you?
I think, the dream would just be to grow the practice and to continue my painting practice. At times I've been dabbling with the idea of going back to complete my master's. Maybe, let's see. Yeah.
That'd be interesting. And also you've thought about some teaching, haven't you?
And I've thought about teaching, yeah.
Teaching adults.
That's right, yeah. Yes, I really enjoy teaching. It's a lovely, it creates that lovely community of, the people who are interested with arts and sharing information and generating more in the arts, which I love.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exciting, and hopefully that can happen. I know your last plan for teaching an adult workshop had to go by the wayside with COVID, but I'm sure that's going to happen. And you have a real gift with working with people, I think, and you're so lovely working with the children with Creative Matters. And I'm very lucky to have you, and I hope you're not going to go anywhere in a hurry. I'll just slip that one in.
Thanks, Mandy.
So, it's been really nice talking to you, and it's so interesting when you have a friend or, somebody you've met through work, whatever, who, not always sure of people's stories, and it's really lovely to hear you talking about your background and also the way, what informs your paintings. And, I have such a deeper appreciation for what you do from hearing your thoughts and the connections that you make.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very, very much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a lovely conversation and, I'm in good hands.
Thank you. It's lovely.
Thanks, Mandy.